the engagement or the appointment of Faisal Rodriguez. We for some time have been cultivating a series of relationships associated with primarily the political processes and the decision makers to a degree in that respect in Mexico with regard to the advancement of projects like Santo Tomas, which we all know to be a highly sensitive subject in the sense that our development objectives clash directly with the policies and intentions of the previous administration in Mexico, that of the presidency of Mr. Obrador. The bottom line is there was a very serious and impactful disdain or dislike for open pit mining practices, take a position taken by Mr. Obrador and echoed throughout his administration. This was thought to carry over to the administration of Ms. Sheinbaum. But what we have come to understand is that a statement that she made last fall as to the fact that there would be in the context of the development of Mexican projects, industrial projects, that there would be one-off scenarios that would be approved, provided that those circumstances related in a positive way to in both an environmental and in a social circumstance. And that is proven to be the fact in the sense that we've now been included in Plan Sinaloa formally. And to understand what Plan Sinaloa is, it is a subset of Plan Mexico. The president and her administration have set up 14 economic hubs throughout Mexico, one of which is centered around Topolobampo, which is the port from which Santo Tomas would essentially would export its concentrate, and within that economic hub at Topolobampo, we understand that there were initially 7 projects that were identified within the context of Plan Sinaloa, and we understand recently that grouping of prospective projects may have been reduced to 4. And we remain one of those projects, one of 4. From a financing perspective, there is a trend now that we're starting to see more and more entities are wanting to discuss Santo Tomas in a very practical manner that obviously will lead to their interest transitioning into either an acquisition or something of that nature. In other words, some form of formal interest participation in the project. Faisal Rodriguez and certain associates of his will be participating in a financing that we've structured specifically for individuals that are active in one noteworthy way or other in Mexico. Such individuals, we determine, will be of assistance in moving this project forward in one way or another. That excuse me, that financing will be exclusive to those individuals. It won't be overly significant in size. We anticipate it to be somewhere in the range of $2 to $3 million US, but it's sufficient to give us enough runway to work ourselves into the fall, during which time we expect to conclude a financing with Canaccord Genuity, who have been pushing us for some time now with an eagerness that involves them expressing an interest in funding all that which is necessary to complete a preliminary feasibility study for the project. Now, do we want to be doing that today at these price levels? I don't think so. I don't think there's a person out here that wants to do it unless they were concerned that financing couldn't materialize at a slightly later date or at hopefully a higher price. I've asked Canaccord for the time for us to allow our market to represent who we think and what we think it should represent in terms of a closer approximation to the value of Santo Tomas and what we honestly believe this project can deliver to the shareholders in due course. And Canaccord has agreed to step back and allow us time to work our market in whatever form that we're able to, up to a level that at least gives us a more comfortable financing level that doesn't involve dilution that, from my perspective, and I think the perspective of everybody involved with the company, would be outlandishly excessive. We are going to do everything we can over the next 4 to 5 weeks to avoid that. I do believe that we are capable of finishing the PFS by the end of 2026. I'm going to quote the managing director of Canaccord. He told us to fully expect that the suitors that we're seeking are going to begin to materialize as we get towards the end of the PFS process. And that's the best statement I can give you by somebody who sits quite objectively outside of the company as a third party, who I believe from his considerable experience is making that statement with a quite reasonable assumption. So the question is, could you add some color or background how the contact with Faisal came about? And I want to do this. Thank you for this question, Malte. Between Mario's involvement and now Faisal, it seems that Santo Tomas is becoming more well known in Mexico. Much of the credit for both the involvement of Mario Zamora and Faisal Rodriguez is the direct result of work being done behind the scenes by Ubaldo Treviso, our minority partner, a project partner in Mexico. Ubaldo's help has been phenomenal. And I have to say at this time that this project would likely not exist were it not for the contributions that Ubaldo Treviso has made to the project. And what he does to ensure that the federal recognition of the culture within Oroco that's being is become so important to essentially the inclusion of this project in Plan Sinaloa. It relates specifically to how we have interacted with the community, and that those initiatives, outside a few that we've taken from here, but for the most part, they have been generated by Ubaldo Treviso. I think that with Faisal joining us, we can now be quite open about the level of confidence that we have, because prior to this point in time, over the last 6 months, we were able to develop the political support at all levels necessary to see this project through, but that was at the political level and wasn't necessarily at the regulatory level. And that's where Faisal Rodriguez comes in. He is very adept and very experienced at dealing at that level. And that is that level is not the same as dealing politically. They're operating under other circumstances, other guidelines, and Faisal is very conscious of the difference between the political support that we've got and that which is required to work our way through and finesse our way through the regulatory process. I honestly believe that our strategic investors are the people of Mexico. Now, that may sound somewhat fanciful, but the bottom line is what I've come to understand in initiating negotiations with local Mexican business people is that there's a completely different level of understanding of the significance of Santo Tomas. And there's also a completely different feeling about investing in something that they understand and can rationalize in terms of its value without trying to connect themselves to some sort of securities structure that they have no knowledge or experience with. But in terms of understanding what Santo Tomas represents, not only in terms of a mining opportunity, but in terms of what it means to the people of that particular region, that generates significant interest. And I can tell you that Mario Zamora's marketing team has volunteered, and we're going to put together, we've already created a basic framework under which they can start to market this project nationwide in Mexico. And it will be marketed essentially as the investment opportunity that it happens to be. I believe in time, what's going to prove out to be our strategic investment group will be the people of Mexico. I firmly believe that. How much money needs to be raised to complete the PFS, including drilling, etc.? Our current estimate is 25 million Canadian in order to carry the company in all respects, administratively and otherwise, cost of maintaining the concessions, etc. It takes the number to generally 30 million Canadian. Governor of Sinaloa, very powerful man. He is overtly supportive of this project because, generally speaking, the people and the politicians of Sinaloa recognize that Santo Tomas may be the only hope, the only practical hope for meaningful economic development in that particular region. And that is significant. You mentioned a 4 to 5 week time frame to see the share price rise to a reasonable level for further financing. What levels do you possess? What levers do you possess to cause the share price to significantly rise during this period? One of them is, I think once the international investment community starts to realize that the Mexicans that are in the know, actually in the know, are in the political process, are in the business process, are in the regulatory process, know that this project is going to come to fruition, that they are investing, I think that's going to be one of them. Otherwise, we're implementing a marketing plan that's going to be much more substantial than anything we've seen prior to this point in time. And we're going to continue to do more of these town halls, etc., over the next few weeks so that we can keep the message being conveyed to the investment community. From a cost-cutting perspective, Quinn, to be specific with your question, Richard hasn't been paid since back at the very beginning of 2025. I have drawn a total of 4,500 Canadian dollars this year. Everybody in a senior position has taken a substantial pay cut, and of course we've cut ourselves to the bone in Mexico. Some people have speculated that I took advantage of our depressed market back in February and acquired a bunch of shares, which people felt was unfair and unreasonable. Fact is, I didn't acquire one share. I did a share swap with the incoming investors, and which ended up being a net zero transaction for me. In other words, I took my free trading shares and sold them to individuals who then purchased from me, of course, and paid for those shares, which I then took and invested in the company so as to ensure that those dollars, every one of them, went into the company. And I ended up essentially taking back from the company lettered shares, in other words, restricted shares, in return for my free trading shares, which I sold into the market to support the company.
And
So
I would add to that, the warrants also transferred
everything
to the external investors.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Congrats on Faisal. Yeah. We can't stress more in terms of how significant this individual is. By the way, on top of everything else, he's going to demonstrate his commitment to this project very soon when we announce the participants in the Mexican-based financing, which we hope to do certainly within the next 2 weeks. And I think you'll be quite impressed with the level of his commitment and the fact that this individual has come to us and said, "What can I do for you?" Which so rarely occurs in this business. People come to us and say, "What can you do for me?" And in this case, Faisal has legitimately said, "What can I do for you?" And not only that, he's going to help us do it financially. So it's a tremendous situation. It's very, very difficult to convey an adequate representation of this of what's been accomplished in the last 6 months in terms of allowing this project to get back on the rails. People were clamoring for more drilling, more this, more that, none of which would have helped us move this project forward. And as a matter of fact, it may have put us in a position of greater jeopardy in the sense that we'd have more investment with no result. Because this is all about gaining acceptance of this project within the Mexican environmental and social parameters that the federal government has clearly established. And we're there. Great story. To the extent your valuation is suppressed due to open pit fears, which seems very likely, true, then this is a tremendous buying opportunity. Absolutely true. I will be buying shares. Thanks for the detailed update. Well, thank you, Peter, for appreciating what we're trying to accomplish here and what I believe we are accomplishing. Any progress on the permits you mentioned in the last town hall would get press release to generate interest. What we've received, which was, by the way, largely the work of Faisal Rodriguez a few weeks ago, was a letter from Semernet, the Regulatory Environment Agency, that basically stated we could complete our exploration project, the exploration phase of the development of Santo Tomas without any further permitting. There's a residual value, a current value that exists in that project today. And I'm just going to say this. I am absolutely confident that that number, that amount, the value of that project today in a fire sale mode is a multiple of our current share price. So, some of these people that have wished for us to basically go bankrupt, well, they may be wiser than most of the rest of us, in the sense that if they're a shareholder today and we had to sell that project, I would guarantee with my whole share position that sale price would be considerably higher than and would therefore be proceeds would be dispersed to the shareholders at an effective price level much higher than our current trading price.
There's a high probability that this project will transact, and that we'll get to the endpoint successfully. The buildability of this project, and that is calibrated by Richard, the engineers, Jim Noreen, who led the PEA and is on the call. That this is buildable, that the estimation of costs, etc., are reasonably easily accomplished. All of that is good. We're on the infrastructure, and we're in a mining environment with a workforce that will be employed and with ready skills locally, domestically. So I think very high probability, from my perspective, 95%.
We've all heard the numbers associated with where this project may ultimately end up in terms of a buyout valuation. And those numbers are relatively stratospheric to where we are today. I prefer not to think about that. I just look at where we are today. And I think the shareholders need to look at where we are today. Because when we talk about the disconnect between our current share price and the value of the company, most often people are talking prospectively. And those numbers are 10 and 12 times from where we are at a trading level today. And to me, it's impractical to think that way. Where we have to basically focus for today is what the value of the project is today. Then we can focus on what that may become in time. But I think that the real security in this project today and the security in investing in it today is the value of this project today. Can you speak a bit to how Santo Tomas costs and economic metrics are very similar to Hudbay, which secured a major financing? This one you can handle, I think.
Sure. The investment by Mitsubishi into Hudbay for Copper World development was $420 million for a 30% position in a project that I believe, you're quite correct, is comparable with Santo Tomas. Slightly shorter life, bit more strip up front, a
We
few
think we're better.
metrics.
We think we're better.
We think we're better. Clearly, they're in the US. There's some benefit to that. However, $420 million for 30% of the project. You can inflate that valuation to the 100% valuation, and there's another $180 million to follow as part of project build and financing without increasing the equity from above 30%. So I think, this values them well above $1 billion, approaching 1.3 to 1.8. And we think we have a comparable project. They have a PFS, we don't. And so, yeah, I think we'll see revaluation on two things, a PFS and a broader understanding that we're on a permittable track for development.
The question is, just out of curiosity, if there was a fire sale, what would the price be? Well, I can tell you what mine is, and it relates to much of what has gone on in the area, what Xinjiang is looking for with respect to ORRCF, where they've put it up for sale at 200 million US, a project that is approximately 1/4 the size of Santo Tomas. But my number, for other reasons, is somewhere in the range of minimally 150 million and as high as 250 million. And I'm told by anybody that I've spoken to on this subject that I'm too conservative, that this project today in its current form would sell for more than that. But that's what, the question is fire sale, where we had to make a sale within a relatively limited period of time under pressure to sell it. And of course, the buyer would be aware of those pressures. But I think quite reasonably, and I feel with great certainty actually, that it would be a minimum of 150 million US and more likely in the 200 million range. Compensation package for Mr. Faisal Rodriguez. He will obtain, by way of an outright purchase, a significant number of shares in the company. That's it. That's the deal. He fully expects the shares to appreciate so significantly, he hasn't asked us for anything. Nothing.